A cold wind scraped across the cracked asphalt the moment the engines rumbled into the parking lot, the kind of low, growling thunder that made most people step back, lock their doors, and pretend they hadn't noticed the line of patched leather jackets marked with the unmistakable emblem of the Hells Angels. But on that gray, dust-colored afternoon, as the sky pressed low like it was trying to swallow the town whole, something unusual happened, something so small and fragile that it cut through that heavy atmosphere like a beam of trembling light. A tiny girl in worn-out pink sneakers, no more than 8 years old, stepped out from behind a flickering street lamp, clutching a crumpled $5 bill as if it were the last thing she owned. And in a world that had repeatedly crushed her innocence, she walked straight toward the biker who looked the most dangerous. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the roughest souls can carry the warmest hearts, make sure you like this video, leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories like this. The biker she approached, Jack Monroe, known among his brothers as Chainsaw Jack for reasons that didn't invite follow-up questions, had lived a life paved with broken laws, broken promises, and broken bones. His massive frame alone frightened grown men, and the jagged scar crawling down the left side of his face was a silent warning of the violence he'd survived and inflicted. He had just swung off his bike, boots hitting the ground like dropped anvils, when he noticed the little girl standing in front of him, staring up with wide, quietly determined eyes. She didn't shake. She didn't stutter. She simply held out the $5 with a tired steadiness that didn't match her age. And deep inside Jack, beneath years of anger, regret, and noise, something shifted, so subtle he almost didn't notice. Because this wasn't fear in her eyes. It wasn't even naivete. It was desperation, the kind that Jack recognized too well, the kind that had shaped most of his own childhood before he'd fallen into the only life he thought he was worthy of. Her name was Emma Clayton, a girl whose life had been unraveling long before she approached that outlaw biker. Her father, once a gentle mechanic who carried her on his shoulders and filled her mornings with laughter, had lost himself after her mother passed away unexpectedly. Grief had hollowed him out, turning him from the man who used to bake her birthday cupcakes into someone the neighbors whispered about, someone who sometimes forgot meals, sometimes forgot days, and too often forgot the little girl who still needed him more than anything. The bills piled up like a paper avalanche, the eviction notices bled red ink, and the house that once smelled like cinnamon now smelled like dust and sadness. Emma had learned to walk quietly, to hide her hunger, to soothe her father's shaking hands. But she could not fix the one thing that terrified her most. Her father had stopped getting out of bed, stopped going to the mechanic shop, stopped believing he mattered. And that morning, when she woke up and found him sitting on the floor, staring at the wall with eyes emptied of hope, she realized something had to change, now, not later. Emma had overheard the landlord earlier that week. If the rent wasn't paid by Friday, tomorrow, they'd be kicked out. Her father hadn't moved from the couch in 2 days. Emma might have been small, but she was smart, observant in a way only children forced to grow up too early can be. She had one picture of her mother left, tucked under her pillow, a picture her father clutched every night, and Emma believed deep in her heart that if she could just bring that picture to a special place, a place her mother once mentioned, a quiet hill overlooking the old oak tree where her parents first met, maybe her father could find peace again. Maybe he could remember love. But the hill was miles away, through roads people warned her never to walk alone. And she had only $5, the last money she had saved from neighbors who occasionally paid her for helping with chores. That's why she stood in front of the Hells Angel, looking up at a man built like a storm cloud. Jack had never seen a kid look at him that way, with a mixture of innocence and fierce determination. Something in her gaze cut him deeper than any knife ever had. She didn't ask for candy. She didn't ask for toys. She asked him for a ride. A ride not for adventure, but for the one thing he thought he'd lost the right to believe in, love. She wanted to go to the hill where her parents had carved their initials on the bark of the old oak tree, the place her mother once called the heart of our story. She wanted to bring the picture there so her father could remember the parts of life that didn't hurt. She wanted to save him. And she wanted Jack, the man everyone warned her not to go near, to take her there. When Jack heard her soft explanation, the $5 bill trembling between her fingers, he felt a pressure building in his chest, something heavy and unwanted. He hadn't been asked for help in years, not real help, not the kind that wasn't a transaction for protection or revenge. And the fact that this tiny girl believed he could be the hero she needed made him feel both honored and painfully unworthy. Still, without saying anything, he took the $5 bill, not because he wanted the money, but because he understood the dignity of letting someone believe they were paying their own way. He slipped it into his pocket and nodded once, the smallest, gruffest signal of agreement. And with that, Emma climbed onto the back of his roaring motorcycle, her arms wrapped tight around the leather jacket scarred by years of violence, her cheek pressed against the back of a man she somehow trusted more than anyone else in the moment. The ride to the hill was long, the wind slicing through the air as the bike soared down the highway. Jack rode more carefully than he ever had, glancing back at every stoplight to make sure Emma was holding on. And as the miles rolled beneath them, something softened in him. He felt protective, responsible, connected in a way he hadn't felt since he was a young man, before the tattoos and the fights, before the world convinced him he was meant to be nothing more than trouble. When they reached the hill, Emma climbed off the bike and ran to the oak tree, brushing her fingers over the faded initials etched decades ago. Jack watched her quietly, leaning against his motorcycle, feeling something warm rise in the cold place inside him as she held the picture of her parents against the tree and closed her eyes, whispering words only she and the wind could hear. It was then Jack realized this wasn't just a ride. This was a moment she believed could heal her father. And that mattered. Deeply. When Jack brought her home, he didn't leave right away. He saw the state of the house, the dark curtains, the silence, the empty bottles rolling across the floor. He saw Emma's father collapsed on the couch, eyes hollowed by grief and exhaustion. Something in Jack snapped then, not in anger but in clarity. He walked inside, picked up the broken man gently but firmly, and sat him upright. And with a voice that shook the walls, he told the father things no stranger had ever told him, that his daughter was fighting harder for him than he was fighting for himself, that she believed in him, that she needed him alive and present in fighting. Jack's words weren't poetic or soft. But they were honest, powerful, raw. And for the first time in months, Emma's father truly heard someone. Over the days that followed, something extraordinary happened. Jack came back. Not once, not twice, but every single afternoon. He checked on Emma, helped her father clean up, got him back to the mechanic shop, and made sure food found its way to the table. A man who had once believed he belonged only to chaos found himself repairing lawnmowers, fixing kitchen drawers, and teaching Emma how to tighten bolts on bicycles. The Hell's Angel became the unlikely protector of the little girl who had believed in him with $5 and a trembling voice. But what shocked everyone even more was that Jack didn't do it for redemption. He didn't do it for appearances. He did it because Emma had reminded him of something he thought he'd lost forever, the ability to care, the ability to matter, the ability to be more than the monster people saw on the surface. And slowly, the man who once rode with nothing but anger in his veins began riding with purpose. And as the story winds toward its final moments, if you feel even a spark of emotion right now, if this journey of an unlikely bond and unexpected kindness touched your heart even a little, please make sure you like the video,